You already are an emotional being. This work does not make you more emotional. The emotions are just going undetected in your subconscious under the surface, like currents under the ice. And this work makes the unconscious emotions that are already moving within you more conscious. So you can almost think of feeling like a wave of anger during a work meeting where you have to suppress it, anger, frustration, or whatever. That's a good example of that wave of emotions moving under the surface, whether you're conscious of it or not. That is an instance where you probably are aware of that wave moving within you because you know that you have to suppress that emotional reaction. But most times our focus is on something else. So our conscious focus is on what a person is saying or what is going on around us, and the emotions are moving without our awareness. It doesn't mean that it's not there. The emotion is still there. It's those instances where you feel a little bit off, or there's something you can't quite pinpoint. That's an example of an emotion being there, even though we're not consciously aware of it. So, this work is not about not trusting our minds. This work is not about trusting our emotions over our minds because our emotions are often irrational. It's about honoring the emotions as messengers. I'm not going to go into it in this video, but not doing that has massive repercussions in our lives. So, this work is about leveraging the emotions. It's about knowing what is actually moving within you, in your subconscious, what's being activated, what is being triggered. This explorative work gives us so much information about how we are wired, about our unconscious makeup, about the dynamics and the patterns that are playing out under the surface. And having that awareness is life changing. It's about being aware enough to follow the emotion like a cord down to see what it's attached to in your subconscious. It's about following that trail of information to understand yourself better. It's so powerful. It's basically the practice of making the unconscious conscious. And our unconscious emotions have such a strong force. So, this is about becoming the detective of your operating system. So, this work does not make you more emotional, it just makes you more emotionally intelligent, more aware of what's going on already within you. So, while emotions are already there, they also don't just go away without us bringing our awareness onto them, and they don't just disappear if we change our focus. You probably know the feeling of trying to distract yourself. The emotions don't go away. They have a life on their own and they want to be heard. And not listening actually leads to suppressed emotions, which will only make the feeling linger and prolong that emotional state. There is information in the emotion that you're, in this case, not accessing, and you're not able to give yourself the resolution, the resolve. Now, I specialize in working with people who would describe themselves as more intellectual, more cognitive than emotional. That's how they would describe themselves. And in my experience, they do not become more emotional. They just become more aware of how their operating system is set up. They become more aware of their own internal triggers and their own internal dynamics, and they start moving very differently in the world. So instead of making decisions being unaware of how they feel or ignorant about their own emotions or maybe misinterpreting their own emotions, they can make better decisions from a place of truth. They also have less and less moments of being triggered. They achieve balance and emotional status quo faster because they are highly present with themselves, and old emotional wounds are resolved as well through the work that we're doing in the present moment. So, being afraid of an emotion amplifying because you shed that spotlight on it is a complete misunderstanding. It's actually the opposite. Once an emotion is honored and validated for its information, and that is the work that that we partly do on our sessions, we we take that information, that unconscious material, and we make it conscious. Once that is available and you have listened to that message that is trying to come to your conscious mind from your unconscious, the emotion can dissipate on its own. It doesn't amplify, it moves. Emotions are very fluid, and it's a very disempowering approach to emotional work to think that emotions will amplify or you will become more emotional or somehow more sensitive or vulnerable. It is the exact opposite of that. And it also doesn't mean that you become more less emotional as well, because you are who you are. But if you do have a tendency to have big emotional reactions, this really shortens as well the amount of time that you are stuck in that lingering emotional state, because you catch up on that information, on the feelings, much faster as you start getting used to doing this work. So for adults with overexcitabilities, which is a term within the context of giftedness, if you are interested in learning more about that, you can look into Dabrowski's theory of positive disintegration. But for adults who already feel very emotional and who don't want to accentuate those big emotions, this work actually helps dissipate those big emotional reactions faster. It's very valuable and helpful in that context as well. So for those with those deep emotions or hypersensitivity, or very short fuse, if you can say, or with those who experience very little space between a trigger and an emotional reaction, this work amplifies that space in between, or it can get you to experience emotional regulation much faster. So having a high EQ does not mean that you are unemotional or hyper emotional. Doing this work just improves your relationship with yourself, with the emotions that are already moving under the surface, and it brings you that awareness that is so needed to make the right decisions in life.